Good evening. I'm Lane Hartzell with the Asia Institute, and I'm here with colleagues and some international experts, and also people representing Ukrainian departments, education, media. And we're here to discuss the grave conditions that are occurring in Eurasia and also that are reverberating throughout the world. I want to welcome Olga Iskvastia and also Lydia Batig. I'm sorry if I got the name right from there. And the first question I want to address is for Olga to open up our discussion with the perspective that you have and maybe some background to the current conflict.
Thank you, and hello to everyone. My name is Olga Ivazovska, but it doesn't matter. I'm just Ukrainian, and now it's my superpower because I believe that Ukrainians now not just watching how the war is going on from inside. I'm talking first of all about civilian Ukrainians, but to work as hard as possible to solve the problem and to help our state and our society not just to survive, but to fight against this aggression. It's not the first in our history, but unfortunately we have such neighbors which doesn't matter about rule of law, international legislation practices, and after Second World War, new rules and new system of managing the territories and the right for the people in each of the country, in each of the state to build their future without any external pressure. So first of all, unpunished evil will only grow, and Russia's war against Ukraine aims to destroy the Ukrainian state and the cost of maximum civilian victims. It's very predictable, and it was very predictable that unfortunately such type of aggression will be regular for the Russian army because of the Soviet Union culture of aggression. The devaluation of human life was the next inherent in the Soviet Union, and today it is practiced by the Russian Federation in our country. The war against Ukrainian independence and security in Europe will continue until the current regime is condemned. But it is not just a question of the administration or Putin personally, but also of his army and the Russian people. 71% of Russians are proud of the war with Ukraine. Unfortunately, it's reality. Obviously, it was shock for many Ukrainians, but it's reality, and we have to accept this reality and to build the strategy how to survive and how to defend the country and society. And you have to know that 86.6% of the Russians support a potential attack on EU countries. Yesterday, the Ukrainian army returned to control of Ukraine, the temporarily occupied cities in the Kiev region, and found countless dead civilians who were tortured, shot in the back of the head, and raped naked women. The bodies found were not only signs of violent deaths, but people had their hands tied, and more than 300 Ukrainians were buried in graves in the town of Bucha. It's very close to Kyiv. The bodies lay along the road, shot in cars trying to leave Russian occupied territories. Every day of the war, taking 5 lives of the children. Each of the day of this war, we unfortunately lost 5 children per the day. 60% of all children had to leave their homes. I'm talking about the country with more than 40 million of the citizens. It's a huge number. According to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, 10 million people are currently displaced inside the country or as refugees abroad. Another 4 million people are expected to come to EU as refugees. With more than 3.6 million people have crossed the border so far, as considerable number of eyewitnesses. Testimonies should be collected and properly documented as part of ongoing investigation into war crimes committed by the Russian invaders of Ukraine. In modern condition, it is much more challenging to hide crimes. Everyone is aware of the tragedy of mass destruction of civilian and infrastructure of Mariupol, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, small settlements of Sumy region, Irpin, Bucha, Gostomel. I am talking about small cities near the capital, which were very rich, very developed, green, with great forest, with new buildings and young citizens, because small business and middle business had enough possibility to invest money to build these buildings near the capital, which was a little bit cheaper than in capital. And it's an awful strategy, because for many years, this area, these settlements of the capital was rebuilding and was so beautiful till this time. The only open question so far is how many civilians die during this act of deliberate destruction of Ukrainian citizens and cities by war criminals from the Russian Federation and the territory of Belarus. I have to highlight that Belarus is a part of this aggression. Officially, Belarus soldiers do not participate in aggression, but Russia used Belarus territories to organize the missile attacks against Ukrainian civilians and Ukrainian cities. Due to active hostilities, it's not possible to calculate the actual losses among the civilian population. But each of the human stories and tragedies should not go unannounced by the governmental and non-governmental institutions, local and international organizations. If the right to life is not an empty sound for a civilian world, then the number of victims can never be adequate to take action. The Hague International Treaties set out the rules of warfare, while the Geneva Convention guaranteed human treatment during the war and aimed at protecting victims of armed conflict. Later, specific provision of these conventions were combined in additional protocols. Thus, international humanitarian law was formed to limit military arbitrariness during armed conflict. However, armed conflict continued to produce both violations of international humanitarian law and human rights in general, which required the formal mechanism to protect them. I want to highlight that I have to talk about international law, because for now it's international army conflict, and we have to build for future our strategy, how to not just protect Ukrainians, but how to form the base for irreversibility of the punishment for those people who used violence against civilians and who signed this and adopt the decision to start this aggression of full-scale scenario against Ukrainian independent state. But the strategic goal is to create judicial mechanism that not in the long run, but more quickly and effectively can guarantee legal and political consequences for offenders of humanitarian law and human rights violation in general. I want to highlight 5 directions which are very acceptable for Ukrainian civil society, Ukrainian politicians now, because it's about solutions. We can't just sign peaceful agreement for now. After the tens of thousands of the victims in Ukraine, when we saw so huge number of war crimes, in reality, when we saw that this power to kill people was used not only Putin as leader of Kremlin or Russian Federation, but regular soldiers kidnap the people, kill them, as I mentioned, on a regular based on occupied territory, and it was awful. You can find these photos from Irpin or Bucha now in any of the international media, and you will see that we are watching on the hell. in the central part of Europe, old Europe, unfortunately, and we have to stop it in the future because it was aggression, authoritarian regime against democratic regime. You know that Russia is authoritarian regime, that Putin wasn't elected on free and fair election, as Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus. At the same time, Ukraine got 8.5 score in the Economist rating of democracy. And it's I'm talking about score for free and fair democratic elections for the elected bodies in our country. And everything which is more than 8 score is fully developed democratic elections, electoral processes. So Ukraine has the same score and the same position as the best democratic countries even in EU region. That's why it looks like aggression not only against Ukraine because of historical frame or position that Putin has to back to the Soviet Union time of the governing the territories and to try to build new empire with Slavic countries or other neighbors close to that. So about 5 general direction which will help Ukraine and which help to build the security on this region, because Ukraine is not the only one country which will be under the aggression if Ukraine will lose the chance to stop Russia's army. First of all, we are working on advocacy for military assistance for Ukraine from international partners. You know that the war has very high price. For example, for Ukraine, it's near $10 billion per week. And it's a huge strategy that Ukraine is not very rich country. And we have to ask us from our partners to support us with military equipment because it's about defending. It's not about aggression to Russian direction. It's about defending of our territories. As soon as we have this military system, as soon we will have capacity to stop Russian army. But you know that I have to highlight that this myth about the second power's army in the world was destroyed by smaller Ukrainian army, because none of the culture was changed from Soviet Union period. And it's a fully destroyed position about their strategy when what we saw on the first days when aggression was started. You know that according to their scenarios, Russians wanted to occupy Kyiv for 48 hours, then during 72 hours. So as soon as it's possible, without any defense from Ukrainian army and Ukrainian society. But what they got after that even people without guns went to the streets and stay against the tanks on regular basis. It was shock for Russians because they thought that it will be like easy trip to Ukraine and nothing will stop them and they will have victory for a week. So another direction in strengthening sanctions against Russia and Putin inner oligarchs. You have to know that this discussion that sanctions do not work, it's just fairy tales which are produced by Russian propaganda, because the current sanctions are not enough to stop Russia, but these sanctions giving us the chance that Russia will have less money for investment to the war than without them. So it's good to have to try cutting Russian budgets for the expenditures and investment to army and weapons. At the same time, we have to think about middle term and long term perspective. That's why I mentioned about tribunal or irreversibility of punishment of those people who not just started this aggression, but who did war crimes on Ukrainian territory. And establishing the tribunal will be one of the core objective for many stakeholders in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine, because this story will not end when the army just will stop. We have to show that even 5 years from this period or 8 years from this period, we will have possibility to stop the new stage of aggression because of the track with punishment of the Russian stakeholders and leaders. Another question is about advocacy for solving humanitarian issue caused by Russian invasion of Ukraine. You know that now it's that Ukraine is agricultural country, and now we have a problem because our agricultural system has to start to work because of spring period, and the food security not only in Ukraine but out of Ukraine somehow, and not only for European region but for Africa, for example, has connection with Ukrainian food crisis in the future, because Ukraine was a source for many goods. Not only for European region. I'm talking about oil, I'm talking food oil, I'm talking about bread and so on and so forth. Another question is about Marshall Plan, future Marshall Plan for Ukraine. You know, it's a huge option because and we as Ukrainian, we believe that we have to think what will happen 5 years after the period when a Russian army will be stopped in Ukraine, because to have this gray or shadow economical zone in Europe, it's not a good strategy for all neighbors. And as I know, many Western countries are ready to help us with that. And I hope that it will be not only wording about economical support of Ukraine after the end of this aggression. The plan of the post-war recovery is important to see who are the friends or who are ready to be an ally to build the security, food security, economical security, migrant security in the future. I know that Ukrainians as workers are very acceptable in European countries, but it's not our main goal to find the job for Ukrainians out of Ukraine, because this socialization don't have any connection with development of the country in the future. And we need to mobilize partners and seek for the sources like investment, loans, assistance, reparations in the future, because we believe that this punishment, it's not because of war crimes or destroying of the civilian infrastructure by Russian soldiers. It's not only about the physical responsibility for the leaders or soldiers. It's about responsibility of a country as aggressor when they already destroyed so many factories, infrastructure, buildings in Ukraine. They have to pay for that in the future. So thank you. I'm not sure about 15 minutes. I didn't check, but if you have any questions, I'll be ready to answer later. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. That was fine to provide the opening statements. I want to ask John Pfeffer to give the first response, and then we can open up from there. John, are you available?
I'm available, but weren't you going to go to Lydia first?
I was going to get a response to Olga, and then we'll go to Lydia, and then open it up after that.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Olga. It's so important to hear from someone on the front lines effectively, and to also get your insights into kind of the international law implications of what's going on right now. I'm going to keep my comments very short because I think, Olga really provided us an overview of what's going on, and I don't have anything major to add to that. There are a couple of concerns I have that are related more to what's going on inside Russia that I thought I'd add to this. And Olga alluded to this, but we have to recognize that, unfortunately, Vladimir Putin's support within Russia is rather substantial. It isn't, as Olga said, we're talking about a aspiring totalitarian state. In other words, that Putin aspires to have totalitarian control over society. I don't think he has complete totalitarian control. There's still an opposition of sorts. Many people have left the country. Of course, the independent media has been shut down, but there is still opposition within the country. But we have to recognize that, for instance, according to the latest public opinion polls, support for Putin has grown since the attack, since the invasion. And to a certain extent, that's understandable. There is, as we know, a rally around the flag effect during wartime. But given the protests that took place in the streets, the anti-war positions taken by many intellectuals in Russian society, it still was very sobering to read about the increase in Putin's popularity rating. And that is something that we have to kind of grapple with when we try to understand what's going to happen, even in the case of a peace settlement. Because although I strongly support war crimes tribunal, I strongly support the application of international law, we have to recognize that that's going to be a very difficult thing to accomplish when Putin remains popular inside his society. The example, of course, we have in the past, the most recent past, is Serbia and the aggression that Serbia visited upon Croatia, Bosnia, Kosovo. It was very difficult to achieve any kind of justice in that situation as long as Slobodan Milosevic remained a kind of powerful leader within Serbia. Now, of course, Milosevic overreached, you could say, in the case of Kosovo, launching an attack in 1999. And there was, of course, a NATO counter response. And Milosevic's support within Serbian society declined rather significantly. And of course, there was a major opposition movement that emerged in the late 1990s. Milosevic lost in the elections, and it was within basically a year of those elections that Milosevic was handed over essentially to the War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague. In other words, it's going to be difficult to imagine in a real sense, War Crimes Tribunal, a real justice for the victims of Russian aggression, unless and until we see democratic change within Russia itself. And at the moment, at least, that is I regret to say, a distant prospect, although something obviously that I strongly support. The only other thing I would say, in addition, is from the US perspective of what we might expect from US foreign policy. And here, the United States has been very careful I would say, to not cross what it has established as a red line, which is coming basically to direct aid, military aid of Ukraine. In other words, sending in US troops, establishing a no-fly zone. The Biden administration has, of course, provided some military assistance to Ukraine. It has marshaled international support for sanctions against Russia. But the United States does not treat Ukraine as a member of NATO. In other words, the United States is not invoking the collective defense mechanism and coming to the direct assistance of Ukraine. I don't think that will change, but it has, I think, some significant implications for imagining what the future will be like in the case of any kind of peace settlement. In other words, if neutrality of some sort is on the table for Ukraine, in other words, not membership in NATO, the question of what security guarantees will be available for Ukraine is a major question, because that is always the kind of the additional question that people ask, Ukrainians ask, and Ukrainians demand: if we are going to have neutrality, what kind of security guarantees are we going to have that Russia doesn't just invade us again in the future? And that's a difficult question, because I'm not exactly sure outside of NATO what security guarantees are going to be effective. Because honestly, if I were Ukrainian, I would not be comfortable with just the words security guarantee. I would want, something real, that would provide me some assurance that Russia is not going to invade again. So in the coming weeks, this question of what constitutes a security guarantee will become, I think, extremely important. The other consideration, of course, is the appetite the United States has for confrontation with Russia, and that is very low. Obviously, the first reason is because Russia possesses nuclear weapons. As Olga pointed out, this war has revealed the conventional weakness of the Russian military. But that actually is even more troubling when it comes to nuclear weapons, because it suggests that the Russian army really depends on nuclear weapons as its trump card, as its weapon of last resort. If its conventional army was stronger, then nuclear weapons would not be so necessary as to prove that Russia was a military superpower. So this question of nuclear deterrence is really the major reason why the United States is treading so carefully with respect to Russia. And of course, there's very little appetite within the US population as well for any kind of military engagement. Obviously, we saw with the withdrawal from Afghanistan that at this point, the US public is very, very reluctant to support any direct military engagement. I'll leave with one last consideration, and that is, in this developing situation, we realize that the European security structure architecture that was created effectively in the early 1970s and ratified in the Helsinki Accords of 1975 have basically collapsed. We no longer have the European security architecture of the Cold War and immediate post-Cold War period. And nothing has replaced it. I mean, Europe is the European Union is gradually developing its own independent military capacity. NATO is considering possibly expansion as a result of this conflict, with previously neutral countries like Finland and Sweden suddenly interested in NATO membership. And in Russia, of course, developing its own kind of, as Olga pointed out, a kind of a Slavic confederation. This is Putin, what Putin
Yeah.
imagines that would, be Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and possibly the Russian-speaking populations of the near abroad, of Kazakhstan, of Georgia, etc., including, of course, Transnistria, the breakaway section of Moldova, and the breakaway sections of Georgia as well. So there is at the moment no discussion of what kind of European architecture, European security architecture, can replace what is now broken. And so that too remains a challenge moving forward. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks, John. Olga, I want to give you a chance to respond to John, and then we'll move on to Lydia's comments.
I have only one comment that nuclear weapon is a huge question, of course, but it's a form of like political aggression against any activities from the Western world to react somehow because of genocide, which is going on in Ukraine. We see that there are many signs that it's not just a war, it's not just aggression. They try to kill everyone and they terrorize civilian people. That's why I don't see any possibility to have something like, I don't know, federation with Belarus and Russia, because Putin did a great job that none of Ukrainian will be ready to join any of the union with Russia in the next century. It's not about years, it's about centuries already. Another question, I have one comment about constitution of Russia. You have to know that Russia changed their constitutions mostly a year ago or a year with a half ago. And there is a new norm in their constitution that there is an obligation of the state to defend the Russian citizens all over the world. That's why Russian-speaking people and Russian citizens will be like a bad sign for the states, which has this minority, even with the two passports, with passport of another citizenships of another countries. I'm talking about Estonia, Latvia, Litva, and other countries, Poland. So it's very dangerous when one of the country decided that it has right to aggress any of the country because of their fairy tale that someone attacking the Russian-speaking people or Russian citizens on other fields, on other territories. Nuclear weapon is very tragical part of this list of dangerous, but not only one. And you have to know that even official speakers of Kremlin used the wording that it's possible to use nuclear weapon against Western world, against Poland, against Estonia and other countries. And you have know that Ukraine didn't provocate Russia this time, didn't provocate Russia, but they started to this war. So it doesn't matter what you will do if they will want to aggress or occupy your territories or use army against your states. Russian will use it.
Okay, thank you for your comments. And let's move to Lydia Batig. She's at the Pontifical Academy. She's a journalist and also involved with City Council. Lydia, please give your opening comments.
Hello to everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you to Olga, because I agree, if not 100, probably 200% with everything that she said. And my approach to this question, as I'm not a politician, I'm a journalist. And basically for the last years, I was working in interreligious dialogue, and the issue of war here in Italy at my university became, I think, the most painful thing to all the studies that I had, because I studied Judaism and I studied theology of Judaism during these years. And I would like to start my presentation. It's mostly my opinion as a journalist that this war is not only the war on the battlefield, it's not only a physical war with weapon and military and a terrible, cruel invasion of our country, but it's as well a hybrid war that has been prepared, if not 2014, from the Revolution of Dignity, from Maidan, from occupation of Eastern Ukraine and as well Crimea. But it was this narrative of Putin and of Russia was preparing for a long time. And as a person who really studies Judaism for many years, I was surprised with the narrative about denazification of Ukraine, which is proposed in mostly all of Russian media. And when I'm watching it, it sounds ridiculous because I always ask the question, how you can denazificate the country that has elected a Jewish president, and this president was elected by mostly 73% of people. So this message always leaves me with this kind of possible frustration. I would like to say that Russian propaganda or Russian hybrid war is used in few dimensions. It's a cultural dimension and religious dimension. About cultural dimension, as I'm not a historian, I maybe cannot say so much, but I would like to add what Olga said, that Putin is using the issue of language, first of all. The second issue is a narrative of brotherhood countries. And the third issue is a narrative of Ruski Mir, or Russian world, which is basically ideology to create a common space for all members of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. And to create this, perfect liberal environment when everybody can speak one language, can be free to follow the religion that he or she wants. When actually, I think when this idea of Ruski Mir, Putin, and not only Putin, but everyone who supports him, politicians, civilians, they are playing with the concept of diversity. And as I was studying this concept in many universities and with many Jewish teachers, you cannot create or force any other country to be engaged into the intellectual, cultural environment without this person clearly understanding the identity of the country. So basically what Putin wants to do in his media propaganda, and journalists who worked like his tools, they want to say that, diversity, we use diversity and we are all living in this common space. When indeed, when I started study interreligious dialogue, and it's a really tough because you work with Jews, with Christian after Shoah, Holocaust. It's difficult to find this common language. But my teacher, Jewish rabbi Jack Bemporat, told me one thing: you can never get any kind of unity, any kind of dialogue when you will not have your strong identity point. And that's basically, I think, what this war wants to take from us. So it's not only a genocide that means, of course, terrible, about killing people and destroying lives and doing a murder, but it's also a war to destroy Ukrainian identity. And identity, I mean national identity, ethnicity, history, our language. Putin is using this narrative of brotherhood countries because all people who speak basically Russian language, he considers them as his trophy, because he is coming to save them, he is coming to protect them. So this is as well a very, very dangerous narrative. Another point about Russian propaganda, Russian media propaganda and Russian hybrid war is that I would like to mention. It's also very sad that they are using Christian churches as a way to spread the idea of Ruski Mir. And now I would like to talk about Russian Orthodox Church, which I think should be also under the tribunal, as Olga said, for the preparing of religious propaganda for many, many years in Ukrainian cities, Ukrainian villages, that actually was one of the tools of Russian propaganda and is considered by me like a pseudo church or KGB created structural church. Another point that as I was working with basically in Ukraine and in Italy with many leaders of three Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, I would like to say that Ukraine, which is very strange as it was a country of Soviet Union when religious freedom wasn't formulated in a correct way during these only 30 years of our independence, we get a huge possibility when each of Abrahamic religions, other religions can basically live their peaceful life, can follow their religions, tradition, and so on. I would like to say that on this war, all religious leaders except Russian Orthodox Church and even Russian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchy now is condemning the invasion of Ukraine. But leaders of Islam, of Judaism, they all are supporting Ukraine, and there are some leaders of Islamic communities whom I know that are currently being on the territorial defense of some Ukrainian cities. So I consider it as a very positive point, because as I was working before with this group, we never had such a huge unity. Even with Jewish people after Shoah, we have some kind of misunderstandings. But if we speak about denazification and religious freedom and peace and brotherhood that Putin and his government want to bring to Ukraine, because the main idea, the main message in propaganda is denazificate Ukrainian Kyiv government that is sitting there and oppressing religion, oppressing Russian-speaking people. What about the Museum of Holocaust, Baban Yar in Kyiv, that was bombarded 3 weeks ago by Russian occupiers? And the leader of Ukrainian Jewish community, Yakov Dolblai, he said such a very emotional sentence that I remember, and I probably will never forget it. He said, "How many times can you kill the same people?" So these people have been already killed during Second World War, and now you are doing this invasion. It's invasion on human life, but also on a memory of generation. What about the principle never again that world is speaking now? What about the principle that all democratic countries are talking? So I consider it's a really terrible crime that and only positive thing that I see here, that all religious communities are united in condemning the common enemy. As well, about propaganda, I would like to say that as a journalist, I think that it's a bit naive to blame one person, even a tyrant, by for creating such a war in the center of Europe and basically invading the independent country. As Olga said, I think more than 70% of Russians are supporting Putin and his regime. And I'm not talking about, poor old Russian people who live in the villages and they have only one channel, which is ridiculous and basically aggressive propaganda there. But I'm talking about people of my age who have free access to internet. Now, of course, there are some measurements, who traveled around the world. But still, I will tell you honestly, I monitor all social media from Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and other. It's not only a war that is created by Putin and by nomenclature of the Russian government. It's a cultural war that is created by a country and people, which is terribly to admit, and especially young people are supporting this war. I don't like this a bit propagandistic, I think, because I live in Italy and I see a lot of pro-Russian propaganda here in television. And as I study theology, it would be wrong for me to say, we should compare this suffering of this nation is worst and another nation suffer less. But if we speak about how all world is interested, what is with Russian citizens now? I will tell you what is with Russian citizens now and with young people. They are suffering because IKEA is closed. Young people are suffering because their government closed Instagram and they cannot earn money and they cannot, live the comfortable life they used to live. But what about, let's just imagine, I maybe will speak from my human perspective, not even a journalistic perspective. It's a country that has 167 or 60, 147 or 46 million of people. How can hold this country? What kind of opposition we are talking about? If I haven't seen even, I see all countries protesting for freedom of Ukraine, for this terrible war crime. I don't see it in Russia. I see few, as a journalist, I see few messages. No war, нет войне in Russian, but no war where? No war against whom? Who should be recognized as a person who caused this war? And I remember that a famous philosopher, Carl Gustav Jung, German philosopher, had this idea about collective mind. And this idea by many theologians was used to condemn Hitler regime. And they said, why he was killing Jews? Not because it was his crazy idea, because before making every decision, he was making his propagandistic moves. And for example, he went and said to German people, let us just take business from Jews, destroy this nation, send them to concentration camps, and let's see. So he was listening how citizens react on this. If citizens would react in different way and would say, no, it's a crime, they are human beings, he would never probably start it. It would be much difficult because look on Ukraine, for example. We were basically in very similar condition with Russia when Soviet Union collapsed, about religion, freedom, and everything. But I just always say to my friend here in Italy, in 2014, our people who mentally cannot accept this tyrannical regime, they went and they started to protest. They risked their life just to protect their dignity and protect the future of their children. And it's not like I want to create this negative approach to Russians, but I would like the world, as a journalist, as a person, as a student, I would like the world to hear that in crimes like this, you cannot blame one person or one party, because like Bible say to us, Hebrew Bible basically say that you cannot be somewhere in the middle when evil comes. You choose or one side or you choose another side. And tolerating evil is the same as basically supporting evil. And I do not believe that, I see that there are some people who escape the country, who run away from the country, who say that war shouldn't continue again. But still, this narrative that I personally dislike about brotherhood countries, it still exists, that the war will end and we should become brothers again. But this narrative was created by Soviet Union and by Russian propaganda as Ruski Mir, because Russian world, because there is no brotherhood between us. It could be normal relationship between us. We could trade, we could exchange in a cultural environment, but the main purpose that media, and I hope international media will bring to the world, that Ukraine is not a part of Russia, or it's not some, creation that was proposed to the world after Soviet Union history. As a country, we have a huge history. Our dignity, independence, were, always, were always in danger because of Russia, Soviet Union for many, many years. So this intervention started not only now. The basis for this war was preparing long time ago. And the most important, that Russian propagandistic system in the world, in media, has more power than Ukraine. And the messages that they are showing, first weeks of the war, I said, okay, the world is showing information about Ukraine. For once time, it's clear there is no civil war. Ukraine is not fighting one part with another part of country. It's another foreign country that just decided in the 21st century, let's enter Ukraine and let's save Russian-speaking people. And I think that it's very wrong when there is people and children that are dying in Ukraine now. People are fleeing from their houses nowhere, and they don't know how their future will go. We don't know basically in which time we can rebuild our country. And there is trauma, psychological trauma, not only to individuals, but to the whole nation that will stay for a long time. And there is a danger to other countries. And now I'm incredibly irritated when I hear in Western media, but Russians and poor Russian people, they are also under the pressure now. We cannot compare pressure of a country that is burned to the ground, of cities and villages, and women being raped in front of their children, to the people who are afraid to go and protest, and they are saying that maybe it will change. I will finish now. The main purpose, I think that also religious structures, and I also criticized Pope message in my university, because Vatican as well is trying to do a lot for Ukraine on diplomatic level, but it will not work until Vatican diplomacy will not recognize, for example, the Patriarch of Constantinople recognize the aggressor's name and will say that I'm sorry, but it cannot continue like this anymore. We cannot bring double standards and double message. So it should be only one statement that we have one aggressor, and this country is responsible for the crimes that are happening in Ukraine, and everyone who supports Putin in media, journalists have the same responsibility. We cannot hide from this and escape. I think it's very important to make it clear, because it cannot be tolerated again, especially after what is happening now, and tolerating of this I consider ridiculous.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for your comments. Let me ask Lakhvinder Singh, who's the president of the Korea Peace Foundation and also of Interfaith Dialogue, which is what you work on, to provide a brief response, and then Lydia with an exchange, and then I'm going to open it up. And if you want to raise your hand, there's a little reactions down at the bottom that if you press that, you can raise your hand and I can see it. Okay, Lakhvinder.
So this is just a comment or my paper? What do you mean? My main lecture or just a comment?
Just a comment to respond
Okay.
to Lydia's.
Okay. As a comment to my dear friend Lydia's presentation, I feel she's perfectly correct when she said what happens when religion is used as a political tool to propagate some political perspective. You know, as you know, I'm a president of Gandhian cultural community in Korea. So Gandhiji told us that religion should be used for spiritual growth of man. So religion is designed to grow so that human being can grow spiritually. But when religion comes under the control of the state, it can have very dangerous consequences. So Ukraine war is the prime example before us. So as Lydia told us, this was going on for a long time, you know. So they have created a kind of religious justification for this mass destruction, mass death. So many people who are not smart enough to go through the whole thing feel, oh, this is their religious responsibility to kill people, you know. So this can create a very dangerous situation, you know. So here we have to always remember that Gandhiji told us that war happens in the mind of man, and when mind is controlled by political state, it can create very dangerous situation. So I fully, as you can say, 200% agree what my friend Lydia was trying to tell us. Situation is very dangerous and very, now it's very, very difficult for rest of the world to come out of it. It's not, once you are brainwashed like this, it's very difficult to clean it, clean it, come back. So because as you know, the topic of today's discussion is how to create a total peace, a true peace. And for true peace, we have to wash our sins, now, because too much damage has been done, too much brainwashing has been done. It's not easy to come clean, so we are in a very difficult situation. I'm afraid to say like that. I don't see any easy end to the war now, because state has used very spiritual thing for very nefarious purposes, So we have to go back to Gandhiji, what he told us and what he tried to tell us, that war is a state of mind. It's a state of which happens in the brain of man. Until that brains are not cleaned with the proper perspective, war cannot be ended. So I fully agree. I endorse what Lydia told us. Thank you. I think President, your mic is not working.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you, Lakhvinder. I want to ask Lydia if she would like to respond quickly, and then we'll open it up for further discussion. Sorry about the microphone.
Yeah, I thank you for a comment, and I just maybe would like to add something that, religious structures as well as administrative, as governmental structures, it's not only a formal institution. So like to respond to the tradition and to respect the tradition, but mostly this structure are supposed to speak about the truth. And because, it's maybe a very spiritual thing, but we study Bible, and from the biblical perspective, God is love, justice, but first of all, God represents the truth. So religious structures in the world like Vatican, other churches should correspond and should be active and should give dynamic response to what's going on now and to condemn basically the aggressor. Otherwise, I don't understand why these religious structures would even exist. And this is like respect to the tradition, but modern world and especially the young generation needs to hear not only a response from the government, but needs to hear a response from their religious leaders to see that they are united with them. And, I will tell you honestly, in Hebrew Bible, it's really in Deuteronomy, first of all, it's underlined very deeply that you are supposed to defend your life. You are supposed to fight with your enemies who come to kill you. It doesn't bring any anti-human message. It's a real message that should be performed. So I think that I hope that Vatican would give in future more clear response to the situation that we have now.
Thank you. Okay, let me open it up for anyone. Just raise your hand or click the little reaction at the bottom. Okay, Mr. Jongsum Shin, you can undo your mic there. Undo your microphone.
Yeah, sorry.
There you are.
So, yeah, thank you for speech delivered by Olga, Abby, Jobab, Sky, and Linda. And in my view, Putin has put himself on the wrong side of history. So I strongly would like to say to those who joined the Russian invasion into Ukraine don't follow its criminal orders. And I strongly to urge Russian soldiers, you must be lay down your weapons and go home. Because the world is now at stake in terms of national security. And the world must act immediately for our healthy and a safe future by joining hands together. And we are expecting, and I'm so much expecting the speech scheduled to be delivered in front of our assembly on 11 by Ukraine President Zelensky. And here I would like to say about the Budapest Agreement. Not far away from the time when Ukraine was got independence from a Cold War, from exactly Russian Federation. They signed the agreement all together in the presence of powerful states, Russia and United States and United Kingdom. If time allows, I would like to read the memorandum of the Budapest Agreement one by one. And there are 6 articles. One more time to remind what the Budapest Agreement is. Can I read one by one if time allows now?
Sure. How about if we go with about 5 to 7 minutes? Is that enough time for you?
Okay. Just everybody knows the Budapest Agreement was abandoned by the committee by commitment of aggression into Ukraine territory by Putin. So we now think of the nuclear weapon. North Korea holds nuclear weapon at the moment. We are now technically at war against North Korea. So we are now at the moment worried about the bright range of agreements we signed together, North Korea and South Korea. Just because they have nuclear weapon, but we are free nuclear weapon. So we now would like to discuss about these issues. Mr. Lakhvinder, Doctor, what is your opinion on these issues?
Regarding what? Which issue you're talking about?
The North Korea holds nuclear weapon, but we are free of nuclear weapon at the moment.
Yes, I think.
Can I interject for a moment? Jong-sam, can you please put the 6 points from the Hungarian agreement?
Yeah.
Can you put those in the chat? Yeah, so we can review to those or reference those and then continue the dialogue. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, Lakhvinder.
Okay, in brief, I will take only 1 minute. Ukraine acted in good faith. In good faith, it gave up its nuclear weapon. Honestly believed in Russia, honestly believe in USA, honestly believe in UK, so that they will really protect me. So there was no force was used. It was a good faith agreement. So now it was duty of all the 3 countries to respect that good faith, which was shown by Ukraine. But unfortunately, the good faith shown by Ukraine was not maintained by Russia. So now, in this situation, how can we expect North Korea to give up nuclear weapon, because even if there's some grant is given by USA or even China that nobody will touch you, but this faith can be violated by third party. So I think denuclearization or NPT treaty has suffered a lot. What happened to Ukraine is a very serious threat to NPT in the world. Proliferation now is going to be very, very difficult to convince North Korea to give up its nuclear weapon. So we have knowingly or unknowingly we have done a huge mistake by not supporting Ukraine. When Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapon, it was in good faith. So we should have forced Russia not to violate Ukraine. Now it hasn't violated. There a lot of destruction has been done. So many Ukrainians will come out in the few coming months with article with sessions that we made a historic mistake by giving nuclear weapons. So I think irreversible mistake in human history has been made. Now it will be very, very difficult for a nuclear state to give up its nuclear weapon, because guarantee are just a piece of paper. It has no meaning. So nuclear proliferation treaty, nuclear control is a great danger. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I want to give a chance for Ingil Ra to comment, also Kisle Kumar and Dr. Swati. Mr. Ra.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Wayne Husser. Thank you for the two keynote speakers. For your keynote speak, I can understand more the situation happened in Ukraine, and also the other influence around the Ukraine religious unity happened around and toward this situation is quite interesting. I have several things in my mind, so I don't know how I express all the ideas in a best way. First of all, I really hate what Russia did in Ukraine. They even say that is the war against Ukraine. They say special military operation. Definitely, Putin should be blamed since Russia began to invade Ukraine. And Russia has made excuses for invading Ukraine for a variety of reasons, but attacks on innocent civilians cannot be justified for any reason. The law of history is that whoever strikes first always perishes. That's what Germany did, Japan did it. We should not, however, provide the cause of the conflict, I think. I don't want to explain about these situations, but it's like Hitler was the demon who started World War II. But that demonic man became Germany's leader and created German nationalism that fostered Nazism. Historians attribute Germany to be the cause of the World War II because Germany had to pay too much war reparations. The German economy thus fell into a reversible collapse. So in response, Hitler was elected by manipulating the strong dissatisfaction of the German people first over the issue and began preparing the army for World War II. Because of these historical lessons, the US did not demand money from Germany and Japan after World War II. Instead, US did not spare financial support, such as the Marshall Plan and Japan's reconstruction project. But Olga said that will be one of the actions international communities really consider towards Ukraine after war. But anyway, the United States and the Western world did not really care at all about Russia in the financial trouble that dissolved the Soviet Union. More of the US and the Western world encouraged former Soviet states and satellite states join NATO, while Russia remained isolated. So in this case, the US did not apply the smart policies provided for Germany and Japan after World War II. So in this context, Putin has become a president who wants to rekindle a glorious day. So who actually created this monster, Putin? Maybe America or Western world. So however, it is very touching watching the TV every day. Unexpected reversal occurred when the Ukrainian army engaged in this battle. So in the beginning, it was like a battle between Putin and Ukraine. It's now it becomes this battle is Putin versus global citizens. So this is the somehow like the second speaker said, this is somehow we touch our religious component. So we oppose this wall of aggression, transcending race, ethnicity, and religion. So somehow this is the era in which sincere people all over the world are living, moving, unknowingly mankind past the Cold War era and enter somehow we call a new era. So the world order is changing through the human conscience. So in that sense, all the religious, the role of the older religion is encouraging the people's heart to follow and bring the eternal peace into their reason. So maybe I don't want to go in detail, but the Ukraine situation is very similar situation in Korean Peninsula. So I can learn many things from these situations in Ukraine. As the Korean Peninsula and Ukraine is the other part of this totalitarianism in the West and East. So watching all the international collaboration and supporting to Ukraine situation. And also we are very cautiously watching the move, the allies of the Russia, which is the China and North Korea. So China and North Korea is always watching what has happened in Ukraine. So what if Russia has successfully invaded Ukraine, then what happened in this Northeast Asia? So it's very dangerous situations. At the same time, maybe during the discussion, we can find this crisis. At the same time, we can find some other opportunities in these cases. By some of the points already, the second speaker highlighted another aspect of bringing harmony, bringing the peace by uniting all the religious aspect, awakening people's conscience, and also that really bring huge attention by the global citizens to these dangerous situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingil, for the perceptive comments, especially on the likewise between East Asia and Ukraine being in the middle. And Korea has also been in the middle, right, with Japan, Mongolia, and China, and nuclear armed and so forth today. Does anyone else want to ask a question or to make a comment? Dr. Swati? Yes. We're not able to hear you. Testing one, can you hear me? There you go. connecting to Otto. Okay. While we're waiting for Dr. Swati, Emmanuel, can you address that question? Emmanuel Pasterich and I have worked together for a long time, and Emmanuel studied all the languages of East Asia. So he speaks Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. And this is important because I think that he has a good understanding of the mind of East Asia. And in the correlation there that Ingil talked about with Ukraine and Korea, East Asia, can you just make some comments on that? I find that to be interesting.
Comments on what specific
On-
question?
On East Asia and Ukraine being in similar geostrategic situations.
Right. Well, we know from what happened in the 1920s and 1930s, the Korean Peninsula was quite similar to what we saw in Poland and Ukraine in that period, the jostling, well, between the expansion of colonial powers and ultimately, because Ukraine, of course, torn back and forth between Germany Poland and Ukraine, Germany and the USSR in a sort of incredibly impossible choice and suffering on both sides. In the case of Korea, it was not the same, obviously, but there was a similar conflict between great powers. Soviet Union did not enter the Second World War in the Korean Peninsula until the very end by essentially secret agreement with Japan. But it almost did. And of course, it fought with Japan previously in Mongolia during the interwar period. So looking at the present, there's enormous potential for as the sort of global system for systems for global governance become weaker and less certain, and as certain people are empowered by their success in the short term, the risks go up considerably. And I would just say one more word as an American. So I'm not really qualified to say anything in any depth about Ukraine or Russia, but I do know the United States a little bit, and I am worried that the United States has moved away from its deeper commitment in the 1970s and 80s to non-proliferation and also to disarmament, to a systematic approach to global governance, and that there's a lot of expertise that's been lost. All the budgets have been cut back. There really is no part of Department of Defense that is serious about negotiations on arms control, and nothing equivalent to what was done. I worry that what was done in the 1990s in terms of movements for disarmament in Europe after the end of the Cold War, that the United States is no longer even capable of that sort of sophisticated diplomacy. But that's precisely what we need at this moment. I guess I would like to say it certainly is my hope that we can move next stage, if we want peace, is to be able to actually come up with binding, meaningful agreements in especially in terms of disarmament and non-proliferation. It's been done in the past. I hope we can do it again without having to go through an entire world war to learn how necessary that is.
Emmanuel, thanks. Are there others? Dr. Swati, is your technology working?
Hello, can you able to hear
There
me
you
now?
are. We got you. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, from India, I would like to share the views from the citizen perspective. And from the government perspective, I really don't know that which stand they would like to take. But internationally, they're under pressure, and I think they need to select the path from which way they want to stand for. But from the citizen perspectives, even though there is lots of confusion within the citizen due to non-availability of appropriate news. So I think there would be a mass challenge of having appropriate news from the horse's mouth. So that is one issue that we are facing as a researcher from human rights background and humanitarian cause. We are trying our best to reach the ground population to create the awareness, number one. Number two, we are trying to promote peace, but as we need to select the standpoint that whether it's US or Russia, because India is actually very much dependent on these two pillars, and we are providing equal opportunity. But at the same time, if we really want to stand, we have to create our own technology. That is the second point I really want to take up, because India is very much dependent, and nowadays I think entire world is dependent on the tech hubs and weapons and security support. So that is a real challenge. Apart from that, from the bottom of my heart, I am personally, and all the researchers who are particularly working for the humanitarian aspect, they are with Ukraine. So that is my personal contribution, and that's why I'm here today to support my very good friend Lydia, and she's working really great in terms of writing and research, and where religion and spirituality is working. I'm also working with the dialogue sharing, is a positive dialogue, how we can able to create communication, and where is the gap actually, why people are not aware about what is happening internationally, how the international affairs is actually affecting a lot to the internal threats for Indian context. So thank you so much for this wonderful panel, and best wishes. We should come up with the concrete ideas and publication also in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to begin to close the meeting, and for anyone who wants to share their emails with others, please put it into the chat. And I think that chat will last just until we get to the end.
And Professor, actually,
Yes.
I have prepared last time when I spoke, I was speaking about Lydia's, so I have prepared
Sure,
small
sure.
remarks, which I would like to share now. Can I speak for a few minutes?
Sure.
Okay,
I just was saying that I was saying put the emails over there, because when we finish, I think it will close the emails off. So if we do it right now, it's a lot easier.
I thought you were going to close the meeting. No, you're going to be so Manuel and me and Professor Rao can make the presentation. Is it possible?
Yes, yes. And then I want to go to Lydia for her closing comments, and then for Olga to finish the meeting.
Now you can
comments.
start with the Professor Manuel. Professor Manuel can make his presentation, then I will make a presentation. Then Mr. Rao, okay?
Sure.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
We ask Professor Manuel first.
I think it's been a long session, and I don't want to take more time. I only want to say that it might be nice to have a collection of short papers, if for those who would like to write, even just a few paragraphs or a few pages that we could publish later. And I want to thank everybody for participating this evening in this event. I learned quite a lot, and I think we have some diverse perspectives, which is extremely valuable to me. And I hope we can work together in creating the institutions necessary to respond to these sorts of crises, which I think in the current environment are going to continue. We're going to continue to see, not just from Russia, but globally. Thank you.
Okay, Lakhvinder, did you have a comment?
Okay, as you know, the title of this lecture was how to reach true peace, So most of the speakers was trying to discuss the current reasons for this war, but there are some underlying factors which is causing the conflict in the region, So I think this meeting will not be complete until we address those fundamental reasons which are not visible on the surface, but are there causing the conflict. So we have to pay some attention how we can create sustainable peace and true peace in Ukraine and Europe as such. As Olga was telling us that this war cannot end now. It's like this. We cannot sign the peace treaty and end the war without addressing the crimes which has been committed against innocent Ukrainian people. So then now there's a fundamental issue, this war cannot end just like this, So we have to address those issues which caused the war, which caused the conflict in the first place. And most of the discussions are based on the current topics, current reasons, current causes which causes war. But I think scholars like us, our parents like us, pay some attention to the fundamental behind the scene reasons which are causing the war. Okay, I will start with, as we all know, Europe was trying to create a zone of peace. They're trying to create that we want Ukraine into European Union in the part of NATO, so that we can create a zone of peace. So their vision was that Europe has reached a stage in human history where everybody has resolved all the conflicts among themselves, and now they can live in peace permanently. So here the basic mistake was committed. That I feel they wanted to create a very narrow concept of peace, of zone of peace. They thought that Europe can live in perpetual peace and perpetual prosperity, while the rest of the world can live a lot of miseries, lot of wars, lot of tradition. So that was so European countries made unknowingly they made a huge mistake by trying to create a zone of peace. I think they should have kept in mind that that this narrow in this age, in this world, when everything is interrelated, it's very difficult to create a exclusive zone of peace. So here is the fundamental. So European vision was very narrow. So now we should learn important lessons from the European war, that peace is not a dividable, that the whole world has to be created as a zone of peace. One European part or Asia or Africa cannot live in peace while the rest of the world is burning. So here is the important point. So we have European countries should learn an important lesson from this war, that they were making some fundamental mistake trying to create a zone of peace. And number two, we have to accept that what is happening is a clash of ideology. Now, USA-led growth model or corporate growth model is directly conflicting with the Chinese model of growth. So this clash of ideas is reflecting in the Ukraine war, even though many people are not able to correlate into this, but two contending ideology are meeting here. So we have to understand what is happening. Bigger picture. Bigger picture is that two conflicting ideology, USA-led growth model and China-led growth model, are conflicting. So Ukraine has become a proxy of the bigger powers. This is kind of a both countries are trying to keep their own country safe and using innocent Ukraine as their testing point. So two contending ideology has been clashing with each other. So now Russia and China have joined together, and European Union and USA. So basically, this is a clash of ideas, clash of a bigger economic philosophy. And we have to learn here. Here, I want to bring Gandhiji. That Gandhiji told us that to create a permanent peace, we have to create an economic model which works for everybody. But currently, the US-led growth model is not working for many Asian countries, and China model is also not working for many Asian countries. So we have to look at this war from a bigger perspective. How can two bigger emerging economic ideology, contending ideology can reconcile with each other. Until we don't do that, we will be making very, very big mistakes. So don't take this war lightly. I'm telling you, if you want to create a sustainable, a true peace in the world, we have to face this reality. We have to face this reality. What's the future? China has made a lot of progress in the last few decades. So we simply cannot take it lightly anymore. You know. So now, problem before us is that how can we reconcile Chinese model of growth with the capitalist model of growth, and what extent we can give preference to social, economic rights of men and political rights of men. So knowingly, unknowingly, this Ukraine war is the beginning of a bigger conflict which is happening in the world, and that has to be properly confronted, and that has to be properly answered. How are we going to see? So, my friends, I'm trying to tell you, don't take this Ukraine war as a local war. It's a bigger picture. It's a part of a bigger struggle in human mind. As I told you, Gandhi told us the war begins in the men. Idea of war begins in the minds of men. So what is happening now, Ukraine is a war in the conflict of men. No, what is best for the world? What can be used to create prosperity? What can be used to create strength? So we will be making a huge mistake if we try to see Ukraine war just a Russian attack on Ukraine. It's not a Russian attack on Ukraine anymore. It's a clash of two contending ideology and two ideas. And so my friends, we have to focus on the bigger. So sustainable peace, true peace. Now, as Olga was trying to tell us, that there's no end, no easy peace treaty. If you sign this, okay, Russians agree that we can sign a peace treaty now and we can go back. No, it's going to over. No, it's not going to over. Ukraine will not allow it. Ukrainian people will not allow it. After killing so many innocent people, can Russian go back just like this? No, they cannot go back. Now, this war will not end so soon. Believe me, we are in a very terrible situation now, because so much death and destruction has been already done, and until we could reach a conclusive, so we shall prepare a very long debate for how the mankind is going to go from here. So there's no easy closure of this war. You have to believe that we are in a very difficult situation. So I want to draw your attention to the undersurface, what is happening here in Ukraine war. So that is why I'm trying to bring Gandhiji again and again. Gandhi is the best way forward. If we want to reconcile to contending ideology between socialism and capitalism and market economy and state-controlled economy, how can we reconcile? We can reconcile when both parties feel victorious. How can they feel victorious? When Gandhiji is brought into the picture. Gandhi has proposed that we can have a socialist economy as well as freedom, law, constitution together. So we have to use Gandhi's philosophy of where village is given more importance. Local economy is given more importance. Capital growth, which is leading model in the Western world, is creating too much greed, too much materialism, and then materialism is pushing towards war. See, for example, what Europe was expected to play a role to control the war. What the European countries doing? Europe is sending more and more weapons into the war. So what is happening? War is spreading to more cities, more destruction, more death. Instead, Europe was supposed to play a peace role. They were supposed to bring peace into the Ukraine. So Europe has failed to play a historic role. They were supposed to lead a peace mission to Russia, peace mission to Ukraine, so that the two contending parties can be controlled. But what is happening now? USA, Europe is sending more and more weapons to Ukraine. So that Ukraine, it means war is being prolonged. War is being prolonged. That is happening. War is not happening in Russia. War is happening in Ukraine. It's Ukrainian people who are dying. It is Ukrainian cities who are being destroyed. So somebody has to take courage. No, we have to tell them, no, this is not the right approach. It's not the right approach. Sending weapons to Ukraine may not defeat Russia. Now, the idea that Russia can be defeated militarily is really ridiculous. It cannot be happen that way. So we have to have a proper perspective how we can control war, how can we control death and destruction of Ukraine? How can we save Ukrainian cities, Ukrainian children? So that is what I'm trying to tell you. We have to start talking peace, sustainable peace, true peace. How can we save Ukrainian cities? That is what, my friends, don't make the mistake. Don't look at this war from the surface. So many under surface issues are happening here. So today's discussion was meant to raise those points so that we can start addressing those issues which are causing the war. So many of my friends are trying to make it just Russia did this, Ukraine did this. So war happened. It may not be that case, something fundamentally happening, some contending with technology, contending two completely opposite viewpoints are clashing with each other. Russia and China on one side, and European and USA on the other side. So this is kind of a clash of ideas. You can say clash of two view perspective, world view, So in the sense, Ukraine has been knowingly, unknowingly, they have been become experiment ground. Now, as you see, a lot of European weapons, a lot of American weapons are being tested in Ukraine. There are not many people who can say that, oh, this is wrong. We are not a testing ground. So, my friends, I want to draw your attention to the bigger reasons, bigger factors, which are playing a bigger role in this war. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lakhvinder. Yes, this. Well, as you were talking, I was thinking we need to survive this, all of us, so that the Northern Hemisphere is still livable, and that's not going to happen right now, I don't think. But the threats that are going on with this kind of conflict can elevate and escalate, and we end up in some kind of very, very, very serious situation. So, yeah, thank you for giving us that overview. And I think that, of course, peace is definitely how to bring it out. I don't know. I mean, with Gandhi's village republics, I'm not so sure how that would apply under these conditions, but maybe we can have another discussion on the more details and these nuts and bolts of how, Ukraine can be helped rebuild and, using some of this kind of distributed technology and peer-to-peer and all of these types of interesting things. Let me move towards closing here and give Lydia a chance to provide closing comments, followed by Olga.
Thank you. First of all, about your thoughts, and this discussion is very fruitful to know what is going on in your think tanks or organizational heads in different parts of the world. But I want to highlight one thing. First of all, peace building process, it's a process when both sides are ready to sign the peace or stop the violence. And we are living on such period when for Ukrainians, it's like decision between to die or to alive. If you are ready to stop, defend your cities, countries, and citizens, we will be dying. Thousands of hundreds of Ukrainians will be dying. I mentioned what happened when Russia took few cities near Ukrainian capital. It's not about war crimes or crimes against humanity. It's genocide. And I want to protect my state, my country, my people, and I'm going to use as much power or as much attention as it possible to find a tool for defending, not for aggression, but defending my people. I'm from civil society, but I was involved in negotiation process in Minsk for 2 years. I had an experience to negotiate with Russians. At the same time, I'm totally support the idea about non-violence resistance. When I was a student, I used Gandhi principles in my activist life. It was 2004 when Ukraine had Orange Revolution, and Ukrainian presidential election was falsified for pro-Russian candidate interest. And millions of Ukrainians became an activist and came to the Maidan and organized protests for many months against falsification of the people's voice, of the people's decision. And we didn't use any violence because Ukrainian government didn't use any violence against the nation. But now we are talking not about internal conflict. It's not a crisis. Please stop use this word. It's a war, Ukrainian-Russian war. And if one of the nation, Ukrainians, will stop to defend their country, this nation will be under attack all the time because Russians will take power on all territories and we will have genocide in each of the city against civilian. And another helicopter view, it's my message about nuclear weapon and countries which have it already and countries which may have it in the future. Because if Ukraine will lose, each of the authoritarian regime or countries with nuclear weapon will understand that only nuclear weapon is like give you a chance to be on the top pool countries which can manage in not only their territories, but the territories near the borders in any of direction. And can you imagine what may happen in the future, next century or next part of this century? Because you know that nuclear weapon may have some authoritarian regime or totalitarian regime, like Northern Korean and other. So if Russia will use this argue and whole of civilian world will say, okay, Ukrainians have to stop to defend themselves. Please sign any peaceful agreement which stop your perspective to be independent country, to protect your people, to use your norms of constitutions, and so on and so forth. You will be slaves of Russians for the centuries. It's not a solution. It's like a small gap of time for preparation of Russian authorities to have new stage of aggression, but not against Ukraine, against EU. And don't be so naive to think that it's only because of Putin decision. Don't be so naive because next leader of Russia, you know that Putin has more than 70 years old. So he can live till 100 years old, but not more. That's why sometime Russia will have new leader, but don't be so naive that new leader, if he or she, possibly he, because it's not very democratic country at all. So if this new leader will know that power, weapon, nuclear weapon is only one argue to be a leader top of the world, it will be new stage of war, that's all. And someone talked about tactical weapon, nuclear weapon, but you know that there is a strategic nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. And this is awful. This is hell for the whole world because it means that all the system of nuclear weapons in the USA, China, and Russia will be activated on the same time against different continents and different nations, and what we will have. So don't be naive that if Ukraine step back, Russia will stop. Don't be naive. Thank you, but thank you for your thoughts. It's very useful to know how to work with different auditors in the future. I hope that Ukraine will, because we are not aggressive country. We want to live with rule of law as a democratic country and to develop ourselves as a part of European nation, not Soviet Union, old style.
Thank you, Olga. And Lydia, your final comments.
I maybe have a few words to add. I just recently read the quote that chains of a slave much easier to wear than an armor of a warrior. And it's an Eastern proverb, and it really deeply touched me because I thought it completely showed me this mental war that we have now. And I think that Putin government, some people in Russia, they want to do unspeakable and unrealistic utopian idea is to stop the progress and stop this progress that we managed to achieve during the 30 years of our independence. It's such a short period of time, but during this period of time, new generation of people were raised. And this generation, I know these people, they do not understand how can you live in a country that control freedom of speech, that control what religion should you follow, that control what can you post on your social media. People are raised in the atmosphere of freedom, and when this freedom is taken from them or even risked, they begin to resist. And I believe that this war and this resistance is a huge problem and surprise in some way from Russian propagandistic machine, because as they said at the beginning, Putin, Lukashenko, others, we need 2-3 days and Kyiv will fall, because they underestimated the power of this of mentality and life from freedom. They didn't manage to understand that people, they are auditory. They could manage this plan 20 years ago, for example, maybe even in 2014, maybe. But now it's a totally new generation is raised. And this generation not even doesn't want to be in Russian world and live with them. Life there will be impossible because you will need to take yourself from the roots of your country, of your ethnicity, and transform yourself into, as it was a Soviet Union concept, Homo Sovieticus, a person that has nothing. You belong to nowhere, you belong to this system. You need to cancel memory of your ancestor and future of your children to live there. So basically you should, you should erase your individuality and become a tool. And as I see, and honestly, I'm very proud from our people, from my friends, from whole our nation, Ukrainian speaking, Russian speaking, everyone who is defending the independence, because they are showing that in 21st century, there is something more important than comfort. And last quote, I will finish. I also love it from Pope Benedict XVI. He said that the world can propose you comfort, but you are made for greatness. And I believe that there is no peace without victory, because it will be a fake peace and it will be totally clash of our civilization, and we cannot afford it now, because too many people we lost, too many citizens we lost, and it will be, shaming their memory and their sacrifice if we will go on a compromise with evil. Because basically, I don't want to sound like, a very religious person here, but I believe that compromise with evil will humiliate us as a nation, and we will lose, not fight for our life, but for our future and for future of our children. So I believe in our victory, and I hope the whole world will pray for us.
Thank you, Lydia, and also to everyone who participated today. I found it to be a very intense and enlightening discussion. And I also want to propose that the Asia Institute host another discussion similar to this that maybe goes into some of the details that we couldn't quite get to, but the hopes and aspirations of democratically minded people in Ukraine and of course in Russia too. I hope that this prevails, and I'd like to see more discussion about this.